years. And then I got hired at the Orange County Register in Santa Ana, California. And that was a great learning experience. Worked there for 9 years. It was one of the first color papers in the country.
Okay.
We shot transparencies mostly, and I learned so much there. I learned how to light. I learned how to shoot food and illustrations and fashion and sports, all the major sports. It was a really good learning experience. And then I decided after 9 years I wanted to get into more documentary kind of work, and so I joined the staff of the Pittsburgh Press,
Okay.
which people thought was nuts to move from Southern California back to the Rust Belt, but I'm glad I did it. It was, I was working with really great photographers. J. Bruce Bauman was the director there, and he assembled this really amazing staff.
Wow.
And I was there just 2 years, and the paper folded after a Teamster strike, which is sad. And then I was out of work for a little bit, got a job in Bremerton, Washington, near Seattle for a couple of years, and then got hired at the Mercury News, and then I was there for about 23 years.
Okay. Now, how did you see San Jose change in 23 years?
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, not as much as some people that were there when the orchards were like, it was nothing but orchards, but there were still a few there. But yeah, it was, I remember I was looking back through some of my negatives, and I had this picture of David Philo and I can't remember his name, Chang is his last name. And they were shot at Stanford, and they were the founders of Yahoo. And the captain said they had 12 employees. So they're like billionaires now. And so, yeah, it was that kind of thing where you would just, kind of see that whole thing developing.
That's incredible. Well, so you sent us some great photos. Let's get into those. Let's see if I can do this right here. Let's go. So Pat, what's it like photographing a celebrity?
Well, it depends on the celebrity. Usually you don't get much time. I first started doing celebrities at the Register, and they would, they had this routine that the celebrities would do if they're promoting something is that they'd put them up in a hotel and they would give an hour to the Orange County Register, and the reporter would take 50 minutes of that, sometimes 55 minutes of it, and you get 5 minutes or 10 minutes.
Yeah.
That's how that usually worked. And you just had to make some kind of picture in a hotel room, and you learn to work fast. This was a little bit different. It was an interview this is Kirk Douglas, I'm sure you guys probably can tell. It was back in 1988, and it was an interview in his office in Beverly Hills, and he had this office in this old building, probably built in the 40s. And when I met him and I looked out the window, there was those old sash windows that open up, and then there was a fire escape, and there was an alleyway, and the other side of the alley there was this brick wall of another building that had been painted white, and the sun was hitting it, and the fire escape was in the shade. And so back then when we shot transparencies, you had to do this thing called pre-visualization. So you couldn't see what you were getting, so you had to meter everything, and you had to do the math. And so I realized that if I could overexpose that wall 2 stops over him, it would look like it was shot in a photo studio. I just had to ask a 66-year-old Hollywood icon to crawl through a window and sit on his fire escape. And he did it, which is still amazing to me. And then I just kind of threw a light on him with I think an umbrella, and we used to have these Norman 200Bs and bounce that off of it. And you can kind of see the wind between the buildings blowing his hair.
Yeah.
And then when he came back inside, I always cover my butt, and I did some. It still had, I could have not shot this picture and still made good pictures because there was some nice natural light. And then I got him against one of these exposed brick walls in his office, and he just couldn't have been nicer. He was just really generous.
Oh, wow.
I think, a big thing about portraiture is that it's really important that you have the confidence of the sitter. In other words, if you don't look like you know what you're doing, then you're going to lose people. They may just sit there, but they won't give you that look, or whatever, or they may not even give you much time. And it's one of those catch-22 things, because like a lot of people are not comfortable doing portraits. So how do you get to that point where you're comfortable and can get people that you just met to respect you and they will do things that you ask them to do? And so how do you do that if you're afraid to make those kind of pictures? And the best thing is just to keep best thing is just to keep just trying new things, trying things with people that like your family, your friends. Just practice on and copy somebody. Copy Annie Leibovitz or Arnold Newman, or Gregory Heisler, or whoever. I see Brian Smith on here. Copy Brian Smith. Find a picture that you like and then try to reproduce it. It's not like you're stealing it, because eventually you're going to develop your own style. But that's, for portraiture, that's that's a big key, is that you have to exude some kind of confidence.
For this image, did you tell Kirk Douglas to put his chin on his hands and all that stuff, or?
Yeah. And since he was sitting, probably like cross-legged on the fire escape, it was really easy to put his knees.
Okay.
Put his elbows on his knees.
Okay.
And that's real important. You want people to be comfortable.
Yeah.
If you ask somebody to do something you think is going to look cool and they go, "This is weird," then you don't do it, because it's going to be weird.
Have you run into shoots that just the sitter won't go for any of your ideas and stuff like that?
Yeah, and they're usually CEOs. They're the worst. There's an old theory that they're all psychopaths. I kind of buy into that, actually, but it depends. I mean, some of them will do. I mean, I had a session with Elon Musk, and he did everything I asked. But I heard that he also was a model at one point, so maybe that helped.
Okay.
But yeah, no, you definitely run into stuff where people just. But most of the time they'll do it. It's I posted something recently on Instagram of Steven Jackson, who's a Warriors player who's now kind of in the news because of the Floyd killing. And I wanted to get a picture of him with his shirt off, and the PR people were like, "No way, he's not going to do that." But then when I got it with him and I asked him if he'd do it, he did it. And the PR guy's all pissed off. But it's like, hey, what's he going to do?
Yeah.
So,
Now, when you were doing Kirk Douglas, his image, how much did the PR?
There was no PR person. That's what's beautiful thing about that. Yeah. Back in that time, you could do that. It's it just depends. This was just a kind of an interesting, situation. They've gotten a lot more locked down. I mean, now it's really hard to do the kind of pictures that they used to do back then. Yeah. Even and earlier than that, the photographers would hang out all day with those celebrities, and they just don't allow that anymore. They want more control.
Yeah. All right, let's switch gears a little bit and move on to this this next one.
So this was in Oakland, and I've got some notes here. I'm trying to 2007, and he was a senator, and he was just running for president. And it was a huge crowd. It was in front of the city hall in Oakland, and they had built a stage in front of city hall, and it had a backdrop, like a wooden backdrop, um, and um, so we had, I was in the pool, so I could be down in front of the crowd. But what they do, and what they've been doing almost all the time now, is when the candidate um, finishes speaking and goes down to work the crowd, and shake hands,
Right.
you can't be there. You have to actually go up on the stage now. So the candidate gets off the stage, goes down into the crowd, and you have to get up on the stage. And then so that way it's not this big cluster of 10 photographers trying to get this picture, and the Secret Service in the way. It just becomes too much. I understand why they do it, but the pictures aren't as good because you're shooting with a telephoto lens in the back of their head, while they're shaking hands, and it's just not as intimate. And they said he's going to come back around, he's going to get up on the stage, and he's going to go back through the stage, which is just basically this plywood thing that they built. And they said, do not go, once he goes through the stage and he leaves, do not follow. All right. So you might see where this is going. So he's getting back on the stage, and I'm starting to get closer to him, and I'm getting a wide angle picture. And all of a sudden I'm just in the scrum, and we're all just moving, and people are just pushing me back to the backstage area where I wasn't supposed to go. And then I see the line of SUVs, and he's going to leave. But then I see this whole other line of people behind a fence who couldn't see him speaking, but they crowded in there just in off chance they could get a picture of him before he got into his car. And so he starts to work that line. And I go over there, and then I look around, and there's no other photographers.
Huh.
I'm the only one. That was the only one that went through that broke the rules. And so it's just me and Obama and some Secret Service. And he worked that for about 5 minutes and left. So I got the picture.
Wow. Too cool. Too cool.
Sometimes you have to just, I don't want to be a jerk about things, if they're trying to do stuff, but I figured, if they wanted me to leave, somebody would grab me and I would just leave, but they never did.
Well, what's the, for you, Pat, what's the line, the line that you, I don't want to say the line that you cross, but the line that you get close to, knowing that there's a picture like this in there somewhere?
Yeah, it depends on the situation. I mean, you can get too aggressive and be just a jerk, and I've certainly seen that. But this was a situation where I just kept waiting for somebody to go, you shouldn't be back here. And I wasn't in the way, and I tried to stay out of the way. And in fact, this was probably a Hail Mary picture, because I'm just trying to get over this guy's head, who's a Secret Service guy. And I just, always just kept moving back and just stayed out of the way, as much as I could. But it's a case by case basis. But yeah, you have to, and you also have to, if somebody, I'm not saying you should always break the rules. I just think at this time it was pretty harmless.
Yeah. All right, this next one here.
So this was the day in the life of the Soviet Union, and this was a book project that was organized by Rick Smolin, and he did a bunch of these books on different countries. And if you've never heard of Rick, he was a National Geographic photographer. He did a story on one of the things he did a story on a woman who was walking across to Australia with 2 camels, and he did a book on it, as well as a geographic story, and they made a movie about it, and Adam Driver played him in the movie. You have to look it up. I think it's called Alice to Ocean. But he would organize these projects where he would fly in, 100 photographers or 200 photographers to a country, and for a week, you'd have like 3 days, of just meet and greets, and dinners and things, and then you get your assignments, and they'd have all these top picture editors, assignment editors working, and then you would go a couple of days ahead of time to the place that you were assigned to, the city, and they have a list of assignments for you to check out. If they didn't work out, you're free to find whatever. They just wanted good pictures. And I had this was in Riga in Latvia, which at that time was part of the Soviet Union. And this was a very unusual deal. It was the first time they'd had this many Western photographers coming into the Soviet Union. It was during the Glasnost thing. And so this is kind of a funny story, but the day before the shoot, you're supposed to shoot from midnight to midnight. The day before, you're supposed to just check out things and see if it's going to work or try to find something else. And the Soviet officials decided they wanted to show me this herring cannery. And so I'm turning this herring cannery and I said, here, try some of this herring. So I took a bite out of it. Well, 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm sick as a dog. I mean, I've got the worst food poisoning I think I've ever had in my life. And in fact, I think it's because back then the tourist hotels, I mean, they only allow tourists to stay in certain hotels. I don't think it's too much of a stretch just to say that they were probably bugged. And I remember being in the bathroom thinking, if this bathroom's bugged, they're hearing some really disgusting noises right now. And so the next morning, I was supposed to shoot fishermen at 6 in the morning. And the guide shows up and my interpreter, and I couldn't do anything. I couldn't do anything until like 11 o'clock in the morning. I missed like 2 or 3 pretty good things that I was supposed to shoot. And then I started feeling better and went out and shot a couple of things. And then one of the last things at the end of the day was the youngest priest in the Soviet Union. That was the hook on this picture. And I got him putting his vestments on and all that. And then he was going to hear confession before Mass. And I'm Catholic, and I've never seen a confessional like this that was open. Yeah. And it had been raining all day. And so it was really dark in there. And I was shooting black and white. And all of a sudden the sun came out and there's this just shaft of light, this God light coming in. And so I switched really quick to chrome transparency. And I'm about ready to take the picture. Everything's just popping in and out, popping in and out. And I go up and meter it. And I get down on one knee and I look through the camera and all of a sudden I can't see anything. And I look up and there's this big babushka woman and she's waving her finger at me, like, don't take pictures, and shouting at me in Russian.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, oh my God, this day getting any worse. And so the priest jumps out of the confessional, comes over and basically tells her in Russian to bug off. And then he gets back into the confessional. I get maybe 3, 4 frames of this, and then the sun went out, and that was it. So, yeah. And this it ran small in the book, but it ran big in Time magazine when they did the story about the book project.
So Pat, what year was this?
Let me look this up here.
And you're telling me they sent a couple hundred photographers to a location?
Okay, it was 1987. Wow. And I think there was probably 100 photographers. And yeah, they sent all of us to Moscow. And then we got assigned interpreters. We were given assignments. You're basically, you go there and you open up a packet and you go, okay, I'm going to Riga, Latvia, and here's 6 things that they suggested I shoot. And yeah, it was pretty amazing because just the people that were on it. You had Eddie Ems and Marielle and Mark and Carol Guzzi, Rich Clarkson, David Burnett. I mean, it was just Elliot Irwood. It was an amazing group of photographers. Yeah, it was a great experience.
Unbelievable. What a story. What an amazing story.
Yeah.
So, Pat, when you sent this over, this was one of the first ones that I saw, and it's funny because I think of something like this, and when I think of you, you are probably one of the most sympathetic, empathetic, just people, let alone photographers, that I've ever met. And to get into a situation like this, what were you thinking? What was your approach? What was the assignment?
This was, well, thank you for saying that. This was Day in the Life of America, another Rick Smolin book, the first one that I did. And he had 200 photographers go all over the country. And normally this was maybe, I think, the third book he'd done. He'd done Australia and Japan. And he was a New York photographer, and he knew all, Eddie Adams and all these guys that freelanced, and they were all buddies of his. And when he needed 100 more photographers, he just had to start inviting people he'd never met. And I had won a clip contest for National Press Photographers Association. And it got published in the monthly magazine, and he was a member, and he saw this clip, and he said, well, thought to himself, this guy looks like he knows what he's doing. So he invites me on this book where there's all these amazing photographers are. And it's like still blows me away, how, again, dumb luck. So we all meet up in Denver. I get my assignment, my area, which is Lebanon, Missouri. Okay. And I happen to meet a guy, Father Don Dahl, who's a Jesuit priest, who's also a really fine photographer. And I was talking to him, and he asked me what my assignment was, and I told him, and he says, oh, I taught a Missouri workshop there once. And Missouri workshop is a thing that I highly recommend if you're into that kind of thing. But they would teach, a workshop in a different town in Missouri every year. They still do it. And so I said, great, can you tell me about Lebanon, Missouri? Is there anything you can, and he goes, nah, it was a really boring town. I can't really tell. I don't remember anything good about it. I was like, oh God. So they kind of gave me the bottom of the barrel as far as assignments, I think. And the assignments that they suggested just weren't very good. But when I got there, and again, you get there 2 or 3 days ahead of time, and one of my contacts that they gave me was a reporter at the paper, local paper, and I was like desperate. I said, do you know like any farmers that still farm in the old way, maybe with horses or something like that? Because that was still going on back then. She says, well, I know this one guy, he doesn't do with horses anymore, but he does churn his own butter, and he has livestock and stuff. That's great. So the day before the shoot, I go out to this guy's farmhouse, and I knock on the door, and I'm holding the Day in the Life of Australia coffee book, and I'm trying to explain this project to him. And it's kind of like, some out of a movie where the door just keeps getting more and more closed, and finally he goes, I'm sorry, Sonny, but I don't want to buy any book. Closes the door. And I'm looking at this guy's face, and it's like, oh my God, this is a great face. And I was like, so really bummed out. So I'm walking back to my car, and this other car pulls up, and it turns out it's his daughter. And I explained who I was, and she says, oh yeah, I read about you in the paper, because the paper had done a story about me coming. She says, I'll talk to him and I'll let you know. So she calls me later at the motel I was staying at. She says, I've explained it to him. He understands now. You can go over there and take pictures. Just know that his wife is sick. And I thought, okay, well, she probably got a cold or something. And then I walk into this living room, and there's this woman in a hospital bed who's just like completely, you could tell she's extremely sick. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is incredible. But I'm also thinking, I don't want to make this the first thing I shoot, And so I'm thinking, well, I'll get him out, in the barn or doing stuff, hang out with him for a while. And then at some point, maybe I'll say, do you care for your wife, or, give care to your wife or whatever, and maybe work that. All this is going through my brain, right? And then he just all of a sudden says, I'd like you to take a picture of me and my wife. He sits down in a chair and holds her hand. And I'm like, okay. And so I set up, it was really dark in there. I set up a little light, again, another Norman 200B, I think bounced into an umbrella or maybe off a wall. I can't remember. I shot some black and white. I shot some color. I didn't shoot a whole lot. maybe 20, 25 frames. But if you look at the take, um, there's really only one frame where he's got this sort of sad, far away look in his eye. He's in the other frames, he's either looking right at me, where he's kind of looking off, but you can kind of tell he knows he's being photographed. And luckily, I had a really good picture editor, Karen Malarkey, who used to be the picture editor in Life magazine and Sports Illustrated, who edited my take, and she found that frame. And so then after I left, I didn't even bother shooting the milk churning or anything. It's like, what's the point after that? But then when I walked away, I thought, this he's not senile, but he's not, he's pretty old. I thought, am I taking advantage of somebody? Does he understand that this picture could run in a book and be seen by thousands of people? So I called his daughter and I described the picture that I'd made. And I asked her what she thought, and she was quiet for a moment. She says, well, maybe people should see this. Maybe it'll do some good. So that was. And then she died, I think, a couple of months after this picture was taken, and he died about a year later.
Wow.
So, I mean, and this is the kind of picture, the kind of thing that, this was shot, I don't know, what was it, 30 years ago, whatever. It's going on right now. I mean, this kind of scene is going on in this country all over the place. There's so many people without health care, that are caregivers to their spouses or their parents, and nobody's doing stories like this, anymore. It's just kind of sad. I mean, with the demise of newspapers, but this is the kind of story that needs to be told. There's a lot of with the quote about most people live lives of quiet desperation, and it's just it's a lot of things that aren't seen. So that's.
Can you talk about this? The picture here, so symbolic of the pictures that we see out in the world, but a lot of people don't realize all the work that it takes to get to that picture. Can you talk about the buildup and the research that was done by you or by somebody else, or just to get you to this moment?
Well, this is very unusual in that there really wasn't that much research. I just kind of stumbled onto this. I've done a number of documentary stories. I did a 2-year project on a man who had AIDS. I did a year-long project on a single mom raising an autistic son, and a year-long project on a couple who adopted 3 kids from Poland who spoke Polish, and the parents didn't speak Polish, and it was just this whole dynamic of them trying to adjust. And those kind of things you kind of work your way into. You talk to them, the subjects, and you have to like explain that not everything's going to be you're not going to maybe look good in every picture, and you try to be upfront with people, and if people push back too much and tell you that there's certain things that they don't want photographed, then you just say, well, thank you, and you try to find somebody else. And I've been fortunate to find people that were okay with me documenting their story, and it's not always pretty, and they're tough stories to do. They're not being done as much as they used to be, unfortunately, but it's I think they're important.
So I think we're down to our last image here. Young Matador. I tell you, you've seen a lot of stuff in your career here.
Yeah, it's always a lot of variety. So this was something I stumbled upon. I was driving to the Sierras to ski, and I went through this little town in the Central Valley, Escalon, and noticed this bull ring. And I thought, what is going on here? And I saw a sign advertising a bullfight. So I wrote down the date, and I went back, and I was just blown away. There were there's this whole cultural phenomenon going on out in the Central Valley. There's about, at that time, there were about 200,000 Portuguese farmers in the Central Valley. And they had their own culture and language and traditions. And bullfighting was a big deal with them. And they would bring in matadors from Portugal. And it was called bloodless bullfighting because the kind of bullfighting they do in Spain is outlawed in the United States because they kill the bull. And with the Portuguese, they don't. They figured out a way to do it with, instead of using real spears, they use these Velcro spears, and they would Velcro a pad on the bull's shoulders, and then the matadors, or the I can't pronounce this word, it's the guys on horseback um, who have these spears, they would just stick them in the bull and it wouldn't hurt them. In this situation, this kid was only 10 years old, and he was from Portugal, and the bull was not a full-size bull, but it could still mess him up pretty good. And you can see how scared he is. But he has to get down there and do that pose to show the bull that he's not scared. It's an incredibly macho situation. I mean, I can't imagine, like when I was 10 years old, I certainly wasn't doing anything like this. And as far as taking the picture, I had gone to a few of these bullfights, and I started to get to know some of the people, and they let me in the ring, and I'm behind this barrier that you can see in the background. So they had, like, I think 3 of these barriers, and there would be 2 matadors. You can kind of see their feet standing there, and they would rush out if he got in trouble, and they would distract the bull. And so I'm behind one of these barriers, and I'm in between 2 matadors, and I can't move. So this picture to me is just another dumb luck thing, in that it's really almost perfectly composed, and I couldn't move. I couldn't direct them. The fact that, it could have easily been, a different situation where the bull was facing a different way, and it just wouldn't have made a picture. Instead, it was like I didn't have to go anywhere. And so I went to a bunch of these, and it was, 2.5 hour drive each time. But there were, I think I wrote down some of the towns like Madeira, Gustine, Layton, Stevenson. And they would do these from April to October, and they were not, at that time, they weren't like scheduled like a football season. It was, some farmer would decide he wanted to celebrate a Catholic feast day, or he'd had a good harvest, and so he would put on a bullfight. And they had a radio station that was in Portuguese, and that's what they would announce this stuff. And the way I got around that was I would go to a bullfight, and I would ask somebody, where's the next one? Oh, in 2 weeks, we're going to have one in Gustine. So then I'll go to the one in Gustine, and then, but I wish I had more pictures to show you. I mean, I've got them on my computer, but there was some crazy stuff there. They had these guys, the Forcados, that they only do this in Portugal and Central Valley, and they were bull catchers, and there were 8 of them, and the matador would distract the bull at one end of the arena, and then these guys would jump over the wall, and they had these funny outfits on with knee pants and hats with tassels, and there was one guy who was designated to be the bull catcher, and the other 7 guys would line up behind him in single file, and the bull catcher would stick his chest out, and he'd say some stuff to the bull to piss him off, and the bull would charge him, and ideally the bull would hit him in the chest, and he would grab him around the neck, and the other 7 guys would grab the bull's tail and grab the bull, stop the bull. And if everything went right, they'd get the bull stopped, and then one guy would give a signal, and everybody would let go except the guy holding the bull's tail. And the bull would be going around the circle, chasing this guy, and the guy would be skiing on his feet. If you can picture that. and I have pictures of that. And then at some point he would just let go of the bowl and he'd just look at the bowl and he'd go, you're not so bad.
Wow.
All it's completely macho stuff. And that's if everything went well. If the bull got to the guy who was going to catch him and threw his head up, then it turned into a car wreck and everybody got trampled. Yeah. And they get all bloody. And then the basically the sort of unspoken rule was, if you didn't catch the bull the first time, you had to go out again. And so these guys would be standing there bleeding.
Oh my God.
And the look on their face like, oh God, I got to go out there and do this again. It's the most macho thing I've ever seen. It was crazy, but it was also really beautiful. I mean, just the outfits and the matadors. And,
yeah.
I still think it's not something that's really been covered that much. You guys are all probably going to run out and do it now, but just know that it's a it's a long drive, and you know.
But they were receptive to you coming out there, and
I was amazed. They just I didn't even have, because I was doing this on my own.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't representing any kind of. I was hoping to get it published. I ended up getting it published in the Sunday magazine for the Mercury News, and they paid me a freelance fee because I did this all on my own time with my own film, and so I own the pictures. But I didn't have like some ID. I would just say, hey, I'm working on a story on bullfighting. Can I, hang out with you guys? And they're like, yeah, sure. Yeah. It was, it was a fun experience.
Well, we got some questions coming in.
Okay.
Let's see here. Let's see if I can stop this screen share. Let's see. We got a question. Pat, how do you find your daily motivation after so many years of working?
You just have to find something that you're passionate about. I mean, I've always had personal projects. For instance, I did a thing on county fairs. Mm. And I had gotten assigned to like a lot of newspaper photographers. The fairs come to town, and they're setting up the carnival. Go over and get a picture of them setting up the carnival. So as a promo for the fairs, and the thing is, when I was 16 years old, I was a carny of the local. Our high school science teacher owned a small carnival, and he hired us 16-year-old kids to go to these little towns in Western Ohio and set up these 3 rides. And so we would be up there wrenching on a Ferris wheel at 3 o'clock in the morning. We stay up all night. And I don't have any pictures of that. There are no pictures. Nobody took any pictures. I've killed for pictures of that, even just a picture of the Ferris wheel. Yeah. And even with everything I've done and all places I've gone in the world, that's the most romantic thing I've ever done. I mean, just like being in some town for a week or 3 days, and everybody would get a girlfriend, and then the guys there in the town would try to fight us, and it's just like, and I'd run one of those booths, like the darts with the little balloons that they aren't quite blown up enough, and the darts are really dull, and you try to to get a stuffed animal. So when I started doing these assignments where I'd have to go photograph this, I thought, this is something I really feel passionate about. And at first I started doing it photojournalistically, but then I started just going into more just art photography and just kind of getting into more of a feeling of what it's like to be at a fair. And then I got into the whole animal part of it, the cows and all that. And I just would go on my own time I went to county fairs all over Northern California. And then when I went back to Ohio for a visit, I went all over Central Ohio. Wow. And I've got, hundreds of pictures that nobody's ever seen that I'm starting to organize. And right now I'm doing a thing that I was on assignment a couple of years ago, right before I retired, at the fairgrounds in San Jose, and I noticed this big paintball arena with all these huge nets, and they had all these crazy obstacles that were painted cool colors, and it was raining, and so I just started taking some pictures of it, and then And then I noticed, like, and it's in the slideshow that you showed before, these paintballs were in a puddle, and they look like plants or something. They're just these colorful balls. So I was shooting that, and these people running around with guns. And I don't know, I was in the military, grew up with guns, and so I don't know what I'm trying to say with it, but it's something that I went back a few times, and I'm kind of like what the pictures ended up being. So I've always had something like that, or parades. I've done a thing on parades. I did a thing on surfing, um, and these are all things I did on my own time. You always one of the things that a lot of assignment editors will tell you, that if they're hiring freelancers, or for an ad campaign or for whatever, I've read interviews with them, and they almost always say, when they look at somebody's work on their website, they like to see, that they can make good pictures of whatever, but they also want to see what their personal work is like. They want to see what people are passionate about, what they do on their own time. So I think it's important to always have something that, turns you on, and that you feel, something for.
Now we got another question. Just the images that we just talked about, the images that we saw in the slideshow, there's this mastery of capturing that, sorry to use the generic term, that decisive moment.
Mm-hmm.
How are you able to do that so consistently from shoot to shoot, picture to picture?
You kind of develop a muscle for that. I mean, it helps to shoot sports. I mean, honestly, I don't think we talked about the mirror picture.
This one right here.
Yeah.
Let's see.
So that might be actually a good example.
There we go.
So this was in Hanoi, Vietnam. I went to Hanoi a couple of times, once for the Mercury News and once for a Rick Smolin book called Passage to Vietnam. And this was, I wanted this kind of mix of ideally having something in each one of these mirrors, except for the top two on the right, which was hard to get anything reflected in there. And so I would just stand there in front of this scene and just keep shooting and shooting and shooting and shooting for probably 20 minutes, trying to get maybe ideally like 4 bicycles or motorcycles, framed. And I had that in a couple of images, but then this kid ran by, and I just liked the sort of gracefulness of it, him turning, and it just added a little something. But that's just patience, and then also just anticipating, again, shooting sports helps with a picture like this, where you're trying to shooting a lot. And I probably had a motor drive, but I don't think it was a very fast one. It's more just anticipating when something's going to come into the frame. And it's also just being patient. Like I said, I stood there for 20 minutes. I probably looked like a crazy person, whoever the guy was that was selling these mirrors, was wondering what this tall foreign guy was doing, hanging around his stall. Sometimes you just got to do that.
But that, where did you get the vision and the wherewithal to shoot a reflection of something that is in the mirror?
I probably saw something like this, at some point.
Okay.
There's always a reference to, I've always been big on looking at photo books. Of course, I'm old enough that a lot of people don't have books these days. They just go on the internet, which is fine. And there's lots of stuff out there. But if I went to a new town, moving, like when I first moved to San Jose area, I went to the library at San Jose State, and I would just go to the photo book section and pull out a bunch of books and just look at them. And I still have a big photo book collection you can see behind me here. And so I bet there's probably some picture that I saw somewhere that somebody made of a bunch of mirrors. I can't think of it specifically, but there's nothing new under the sun, but you can at least make your own take on things. So.
Do you remember what your first photo book was, Pat, that you bought?
Um, Somebody actually gave me a book in high school for some reason. Some girl I was dating at the time, and I was not into photography, but she gave me a book on Ernst Haas,
Wow.
which was, I think it was called the called Creation or something like that. And I was like, thanks, but I wasn't into photography. But now he is one of my biggest influences. I love his work.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of weird how that happened. But that was probably the first photo book that I'd ever had. And then, but then I started getting into, well, the other thing that was great about Ohio University is I took 2 years, or maybe at least a year of the history of photography, which I would highly recommend. Well, it just drives me nuts when I meet like young photographers who don't know who Robert Frank is, or some of the great photographers, Edward Steichen. That I mean, you got to go back and look at this, at what's already been done, and then try to do your own thing.
Now we got a couple more questions. One more from William Duncan. He's asking, how do you reach out to editors and how do you stay relevant in their eyes?
Well, you're asking an old retired guy. That's probably not the right person to ask, but you do have to uh, go online and find who the assignment editors are, whoever you're trying to get, if it's a magazine or if it's an ad agency, and then just reach out to them and send your link to your website, and maybe include some work, and then just kind of keep sending them. And this is just what I found from talking to other people that are strictly freelance, is that they send out promos. A lot of that has changed over time. There are probably people on this Zoom that, like Brian Smith, that could probably better answer that question. I've been lucky in that I've had a salary job most of my career, and I've done a fair amount of freelance, but I've never had to completely rely on it. So
I'm actually going to squeeze two more questions out of this. I got speaking of Brian Smith, he just asked you, hey, Pat, great photo of Bill Walsh. What does the SF on his hat stand for?
I think that's Brian being being Brian. That would be San Francisco, Brian.
There you go. There's the answer. All right.
And that was in that picture. I don't know if you can put that up, but that's kind of. I actually photographed him twice. Bill Walsh was the legendary coach of the 49ers, and I did one portrait of him outside, a little tight, and then this is another opportunity. And this was at Niner headquarters, and there was this great light in the stairwell, and I saw that they had this banner somewhere else, and I asked the PR person if I could put the banner there and tape it up. And so if you can picture, like, you're going down a flight of stairs and there's a landing, and then you go down. So he's down this landing part, and I knew this light was going to be great. So I put this up there, and he was kind of annoyed. He was like, really? You want me to take a picture? Because I shot some pictures while I was being interviewed, and I've always wanted to just make a portrait if I have an opportunity, even though that's not what is the assignment. The assignment was just to get Bill Walsh talking while he was being interviewed in his office, which was really boring. But if I, have somebody like this that's just an icon, I'm going to try to make a portrait if I can talk him into it. And so, I got him to stand on the stairwell, for 5 or 6 frames, and and made that picture. So sometimes you just have to visualize what it's going to look like and hope the person will go along with it.
And last question here. Last question comes from the great Kevin Sullivan down in Southern.
He is great in his own mind.
Kevin Sullivan is asking you, can we ask Pat what his golf handicap is?
The handicap is that I play golf, pretty much. It depends on what we're betting on, how much is involved, Kevin, and we'll see how many strokes that I'll give you. How's that?
Kevin, there's your answer. When was the last time you and Kevin played around?
A number of years ago, we played at some crappy course in Long Beach, and Kevin he's a good guy. I hate to say that to him, but yeah.
Well, hey, Pat, this has been an incredible hour. Thanks for being so generous with your time and your stories and, all the images that you sent to me. And just being, a really great friend over the years. I hope that we get to do this again. And, I'm sure everybody here would want to hear more of your stories at some point later on. So if you get a tap on the shoulder from me one of these days, hopefully you'll be willing to meet up with us again here.
Yeah, no, I've really been honored to do this. And, if you want to take me out to a bar when this is all over with, the pandemic, and I will bend your ear as much as you want. Till you're sick of it.